Hello, Kyle Sasser here. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about flood insurance. Reason why is because I'm coming to you from Studio B. Why Studio B? Well, the B stands for beach house, and the reason I am here is because my other house that I actually live in Shore Acres, is flooded. So I figured what better time to share some information about flood insurance with you. So first question is probably, what is flood insurance? How expensive is flood insurance? The thing to understand about flood insurance is that it's a little different from homeowners. Homeowners insurance usually covers structure damage from storms, wind, fire, and also personal liabilities, like if somebody gets hurt on your property. It usually does not specifically cover a few things. In the case of something like sinkholes or settlements, you have to have a specific rider added onto insurance to make sure that's covered. So you might want to check your policy. And it does not cover water damage, specifically water from rising bodies of water, as well as other types of water damage. So like if a storm drain backs up and that storm water decides to go through your house, homeowners is not going to cover that. Here in Florida, insurance companies are pretty good at trying to wiggle out of responsibility for paying for things. Now, so far as the price of flood insurance is based off of the specific risk to the structure, not the property. So when you're looking through Zillow or the MLS, when you're looking at a house, you'll probably see that it says flood zone X or flood zone AE. Flood zone X means that it is outside of the 500-year floodplain. Doesn't necessarily mean that a flood's not going to happen, because remember, I mentioned there's other things besides storm surge or a river flood or something like that that can cause flood damage to your house. But flood zone X usually means, as a rule of thumb, that flood insurance is not going to be required. Now, if you see flood zone AE or A something, that usually means that there is a flood risk. And the second letter usually indicates what the source of that threat is going to be. In the case of AE, I believe that means a rising body of water versus like a river or something like that. And the other common one you'll see is a velocity zone. So that's going to be like beachfront, where wind is literally going to smash water up onto your house in a storm. Now, just because you see flood zone AE does not necessarily mean that you're going to have to get flood insurance, because remember, it is based off of the specific risk to the structure.
All right, so this is the morning after Eta, the tropical storm Eta. So you see the streets, houses across the street. Jerry's house, the garage door got caved in. This house also got caved in. You can actually see the scum line on that house. Crazy stuff.
So if you have a piece of land, and let's say that the far corner is low enough that it is within the 100-year floodplain, well, that property, that actual land, is going to be classified as flood zone AE. At that point, you get a survey to figure out what the actual, it's called a flood elevation, and that is where you actually determine what the flood risk to the structure is. And I certainly have seen homes, usually more recently built homes, where a corner of the property is going to be in flood zone AE, but the builder either puts the house on stilts, they site the house far enough away, or they bring in enough fill to elevate the land that the house sits on to basically elevate the house outside of that flood zone so that there is no flood risk and flood insurance is not required. All that said, if you are not required to get flood insurance, I still highly recommend getting flood insurance, because as I said, homeowners is not going to cover flood damage. So if somehow, some way, your house, and we live in Florida, there's hurricanes, things happen, storm drains get backed up, a lot of rain falls here really quickly. Plus, flood maps aren't 100% accurate. They're put together by the government, and they're pretty good, but they're not 100% perfect. So maybe they misjudged the specific flood risk on your property. Doesn't matter. If you get flooded, your homeowners is not going to pay for it. The good news is that if your house is outside of that 100-year floodplain, which you prove with a elevation certificate, usually flood insurance is very, very cheap. And I'll give you some examples of how this risk to the property work. And I'm going to use 3 houses that are literally next door to each other. And one of them is the one I live in. So my house, my flood insurance is approximately $1,800 a month. I live in Shore Acres, which is a very low area of Pinellas County. My elevation certificate says that my elevation to first living level is 4.4 feet above mean sea level. That is pretty low. And I pay about $1,800 currently. The house across the street from me is 1 foot lower, roughly. So they're about 3.3 feet below sea level. Obviously, that additional foot adds significant flood risk to an already flood-prone area. And from what I've been able to gather, they pay about $4,000 for their flood insurance. And then the house directly next door to them that I currently have for sale, they have that same elevation to their garage, but because the house is on stilts, their first level of living space is actually much, much, much higher. So their flood insurance is only about $340 per year. As you can see, there's a drastic difference in pricing for flood insurance there. And it's not something you can ballpark, and you really can't use your neighbor to gauge as well. It really is super specific to that particular property. This is a general overview of flood insurance. If you have any specific questions, please feel free to send me an email, kyle@sassergroup.com. You can also leave a comment down below if you're watching this on YouTube. I'll be happy to help you out with a flood assessment or, answering whatever question you have about the process. Also, I'm going to be putting out some more about my experience with this flood insurance stuff, so be sure to stay tuned. Should be interesting because currently my house is literally torn down to the studs. So I am going through that entire flood insurance process. And it's probably going to be pretty surprising to you because I know some of the things were pretty surprising to me. So, for instance, they do not pay for a place for you to stay, which is real fun. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you soon.